Hey, my name's Jared Moon, and I'm part of a group of underground athletes you've probably never even heard of before. Most of us don't even have gym memberships. We don't have every piece of equipment known to man, nor do we have a ton of time to train. And we don't need it because we're achieving amazing things without it. We are Garage Gym Athletes, and these are our stories. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Jared Moon here, and welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. Here today with me, as always, Joe Courtney. What's up, Joe?
As always, happy to be here.
Yeah, man. Let's get into it. I got this question about sponsors for the podcast, and this is an interesting topic. So first, I'm gonna tell you who the sponsor is for today's podcast, and then I'm also going to explain to you why we don't have sponsors on the podcast. I think that some people they think that a sponsor of the podcast makes it like a little bit more legitimate, but we actually refuse sponsors. So today's sponsor is blueberries because they are high in fiber, high nutrient, low net carb, antioxidant. They reduce DNA damage and they improve brain function. All the things I could Google about blueberries. Pretty awesome fruit. And so that is who the podcast is brought to you by today, because we sponsor our own damn podcast. We don't have sponsors because we don't want to be sitting here trying to tell you all this information, but have to plug in some random banded exercise routine that we don't actually believe in because the podcast sponsor paid for it. So that's why we don't have sponsors. And no, if you want to sponsor the podcast, or no is the answer if you want to sponsor the podcast, for anyone out there listening who might be reaching out, which is interesting, man. We've had a lot of people just reaching out to want to be on the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast, a lot of great feedback from our athletes, and a lot of cool stuff. It's been unexpected, I'll say.
Yeah, athletes we always want to get on, but we like to keep it within house, kind of, because it's
we sponsor you. We sponsor you, the athlete. All right, let's get into a few things. I'm going to give an update on my training. I posted on my Instagram, as I do on a weekly basis, kind of my update on my MURPH project, the EO3 MURPH project, doing that once a week. And this past week, I said I'd be giving an update about the 78% heart rate cap MURPH that I did. So what I'm trying to do things a little bit differently than I did last time I did a year of MURPH. I want to make sure I'm training appropriately, because as I've said before, as we roll into summer, I will not be getting anywhere close to PR times on MURPH just because it's too miserably hot. So I have to make sure that my training is smart and I'm still, making progress. So when the temperature cools down, I'll be able to hit those PRs. And what I'm trying to do is make sure that MURPH is at least once a month, make it as aerobic as possible, because the whole goal in training MURPH every week is to turn muscular endurance into aerobic endurance, which that's an entire topic we could cover, maybe on a different podcast. But essentially, I'm trying to just make the whole thing a big, giant aerobic workout. And I wanted to try and train specifically in the aerobic target heart rate zones. And so that's what I did this past week. And it's very interesting. So I kept my heart rate right around 75% of my max heart rate the entire time. And I had to end up running a little bit slower on the miles, but also had to scale up. And I mean scale up. I had to do strict pull-ups and hand release push-ups to add a little bit more muscle fatigue, which actually lowers heart rate because you're just not moving as fast. And so that is kind of the update there, trying to make that aerobic. I challenge anyone, because what I was also trying to do is continually move. So through continuous movement and keeping my heart rate in one spot, I am now training my body in this one specific area or domain to be aerobic during these muscle contractions, which there's not a lot of transfer in fitness. Like, I've learned this over and over personally, but it's also true. Like, you can get really great GPP, so like general physical preparedness, and be ready for almost anything. Like Joe mentioned, running a half without really training for it, things like that. But if you aren't aren't training specifically for something, you really can't get better at it. Like you survived the half marathon, but if you wanted to crush the half marathon, you'd have to do a lot of running, right? A lot of run training. And so that's what I'm trying to do with MURPH is like just stay in the MURPH workout, but make it more aerobic. So if I can make the entire workout more aerobic, I can get it even faster because I won't be having to rely on these top end energy systems that aren't meant to be used for the durations that I'm using them for. So I'm going to stop right there and see if you have any questions about that, or you think I explained that adequately enough.
So is it distracting for you to like monitor your heart rate, or because you're just constantly looking at your watch?
Not really. I normally look at it during each portion. So, or right after each portion. So, I'll finish the pull-ups, I'll take a quick glance, I'll go into push-ups, I'll take a quick glance, squats, take a quick glance to make sure that no one area is increasing or decreasing my heart rate to any like ridiculous level. Like strict pull-ups have a tendency to drastically reduce my heart rate. So, but kipping drastically increases it. So I just had to like make sure that it was a good tempo.
So this is more of a kind of like strength building, but then when you actually start to go to, I guess you're not going to be doing this every time because there'll be times you still want to get to your higher heart rate zones.
Yeah, and I guess the big point would be the difference between sprinting and running, 5 miles, or like an endurance athlete. They can hold these really fast paces for very long periods of time, but they're purely aerobic. So let's talk about, the guy running the 3-minute mile, or the guy, running the 2-hour marathon, things like that. They've trained their aerobic system so much that they can get to these really high levels of intensity. And really what I'm doing up to this point is flirting, or should I say going in and out of the aerobic energy system to glycolytic and back throughout that entire workout, which isn't truly training my aerobic system. So what I'm trying to do is get my aerobic system so efficient that I can become like the 3-minute miler or the 2-minute mile or 2-hour marathon guy, where I'm like training at these very high intensities, but it's still purely aerobic energy system, which your body can sustain for very long periods of time.
Okay. So let me see if I can give my own little interpretation of it. So like if you're training these longer workouts, and then your normal pacing is that you have like a floor, low pacing, and then like the ceiling at the top of your pacing, you're kind of raising your floor versus your ceiling right now.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. And so once I can raise that and keep, so it's not necessarily I want to train at a higher heart rate zone. I want to be able to do more work at the same heart rate. That's really what you want to be able to do that way. Because if you think about it, 75% of your heart rate, max heart rate, you could probably hold that for a very long period of time. That might be like a jog for a lot of people, depending on the athlete. But you could do it for a very, very long period of time. Now, if you could keep that same heart rate but run twice as fast, that's where real fitness is built. Cool, man. All right, let's see. How about you? How's your training this past week?
Pretty good. It's getting back to, it's on and off. Good weather here in San Diego, so we might start to throw in some trail running because it'll be nice out and sunny, and the trails won't be muddy and slippery. Granted, yeah, it's San Diego, so it's not always terrible, but just this last couple weeks.
I'll stop giving you crap about living in San Diego and having good weather. I'll just leave it be.
Well, I mean, we get a couple of weeks of London feel, and then it just gets back to sunny and warm. We also might even start looking to train for some trail runs or something to do actually as an event, which I kind of posted in the group, but that's a whole different nutshell. And
dude, there are like 100 and something comments on that little post. That was amazing. A lot of advice. People wanted you to start training for different things.
Some of them were legit. Other ones are just giving my picky taste some hate, which I don't really mind.
I did that a little bit.
Yeah, it's whatever. And I fully said that we're kind of picky about what we want to do, but
I get it though. Like I was kind of like joking around with you, but at the same time, I get it, man. Like I've enjoyed Spartan races to some degree, but some of them there's so much damn mud, and I know that's like the point. Like I get it. I don't need anybody to tell me that, but like sometimes you just want to like go fast and not have to worry about like slipping out or, you know, whatever. Like, and so those things are fun to do. So I think obstacle course races like Spartan with no mud would still be really challenging. Maybe a couple more obstacles and just go a lot faster. I think that'd be, and people mention those stadium ones, but the stadium one kind of defeats purpose to me. I mean, I think you could get the experience I'm talking about, but I also like the nature aspect of the Spartan races, like being, you know, not in a concrete jungle or like going through the mountains or something like that. I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I mean, I said mud run just as like an umbrella thing. It's not like mud specifically, but most of those are just made for the masses to get as many people to sign up for the races as possible, which is fine for a lot of people, but it's not exactly what we're looking for. Though I did see, I don't know if you saw in our group, somebody did, it was like an OCR, but with a ruck, which I thought was really cool. Like you actually ruck for the mileage and you can do some of the obstacles with a ruck on instead of mud. So that was interesting. But there's some good trail ones that I'm going to consider and maybe even look to form a group for a, whatever the I can't even think of it now. It's the relay race with like 8 people. Ragnar.
Isn't that a Thor movie?
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Hey, look at me with a cultural reference, pop culture reference.
You read the title.
Yeah. All right.
We can get into, you know, that can be a topic for another time about certain events. And then for the first couple months this year, my wife usually she would come back for lunch, but most of this year she hasn't been able to because of, you know, ship life. But these last couple of weeks, she's actually been coming home to work out during lunch, and I've been working out with her. And it's just a reminder that sometimes working out with a partner can add another element to your workouts, and it kind of helps me pace. Like I don't necessarily take forever to do my workouts, but I might rest a little bit longer than I need to, or and just working out with somebody in general can sometimes push you a little bit more. On Monday we had the squats, and squats this week were rough because there's only doing these cluster sets with only 10 seconds of rest in between, and you're at 75%, and you're just like, whew, out of breath. But having her, like we have to switch on and off because of the rack, and it may be to keep pace with that. But then, like she's on such a time crunch for her lunch schedule. Like we finished the squats, and I'm like, I'm gonna sit down just to take 5 because I need to catch up. But she's already moving on to the next thing, warming up for cleans, and like tapping her toe and be like, all right, I need to start this in the next 90 seconds. So let's go. I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm going.
Yeah, I'm always amazed. Like I've gotten to a pretty good spot in my training, like in training alone, like you're talking about, like just being a little bit more efficient and people pushing you a little bit. But every time I, bring Ben over for Meet Yourself Saturday or some other training partner, it is definitely a different dynamic. And that's why I recommend people try and do it at least monthly or weekly, as much as you can. And even if you like start kind of like I've been doing, like starting like a Meet Yourself Saturday club where people can train with you or something like that is a really great way to get the benefits of training with other people and bringing up your intensity level a little bit. Yeah.
And you can suffer together.
You can suffer together.
Suffering is always more fun when it's with somebody else.
Yeah. Misery loves company. All right, man. And last thing I wanted to update everyone on, this is kind of a more serious topic. This past week was Mother's Day Sunday. My entire family was at my parents' house, and this is just kind of a crazy story. We were all hanging around the pool. We'd actually gone swimming. I went swimming with my boys. The water was really cold, but we did it anyway. I was like, if you guys can get in and handle the water, I'll do it too. So we were in the water. It was really freezing. But then we got out, eating some food, and then people wanted to take pictures. And my dad has this like giant dog. I don't even know what type of dog it is. It's basically like a horse. And he kept running in and out of the steps of the pool, and it was just kind of frustrating. So he set a chair in front of the steps so the dog would stop. His dog's name is Harley. So Harley would stop going into the pool. And long story short, I was on the other side of the pool. My mom wanted me to take a picture of her with my wife, and I was doing that picture. And my son Graham had gotten tangled up in that chair and then fell into the pool. So I already
told your 4-year-old, right?
Yeah, my 4-year-old. And just worst case scenario, like your biggest nightmare as a parent, like there's so many people around, my entire family, but not to knock on anybody, but like no one in my family is in good shape. Like, I'm talking about my parents, everything. They're not in phenomenal shape. And, I'll just say that. Like, none of them pursue fitness. The whole, like, you can't be a prophet in your hometown. Like, truer words are never spoken with me, no matter how much I talk about it, whatever. They'll do good for a little while and then back off. And, like, it's really a big yo-yo effect with a lot of my family. And I try to help out as much as I can, but I only say that to highlight my son got tangled up in this chair. He fell in the pool. He's sinking to the bottom of the pool. And like I said, as a parent, this is absolute worst case scenario. I'm on the other side of the pool, and it's this ridiculous, it's a big distance. And so I immediately react. I'm by far not the closest one to my son at all. I do this like massive broad jump from one side of the pool to where he's at. I didn't dive because I didn't want to like break my neck because it wasn't super deep. It's not like 12 feet or anything like that. And so I dove in. He's still tangled up in this chair, like sinking to the bottom. When I get there, I have to lift him in the chair out of the pool. And to be honest, it was incredibly hard to do. And I don't know how much strength that it actually took for me to be able to do that. Like, I can't give you a poundage. But you're lifting all the water in the chair and my son all at once. So well over 100 pounds worth of force, because my son alone is over 40 pounds, and the chair, everything else. Anyway, I get him out. Luckily, he had not inhaled any water. The whole thing happened pretty fast. I'd say he was underwater, though, for 10 seconds or less. And I'm only pointing all this out to say, if I wasn't there, if less fit people were left in charge to handle that situation, it doesn't take a lot for a kid to drown, to inhale some water and have a much bigger problem on your hands. Now, I'm not saying that he for sure would have died if I didn't do what I did or something like that. But what I do know is the fact that absolutely nothing happened to him and he was perfectly fine was the fact that I have a level of fitness that I can count on a daily basis. And I can count on one hand so far the times in my life where my fitness has directly saved my life or the life of others. And if you were around on the Better Humanology podcast, you've probably heard the other stories of where my own life has been saved from my fitness level. And I just like to tell that story because, one, my son falling in the pool, getting tangled up in that chair is 100% my fault. Should have paid more attention as his parent to, move the chair, make sure that wasn't in a good situation. But we feel pretty comfortable with our kids around the pool because they can swim or whatever. But I still take full responsibility for that even happening. And two, just fitness is so important. Like, I just want to challenge everyone listening. Would you have been able to do the same thing if you were in the same situation? Best case, just don't get in that situation. But next, would you have been able to help? And I don't think that anyone in my family could have answered that question in the positive, except for maybe my wife, but she was even further away than I was. So I just like to tell that story because I think fitness is important. I think what we're doing is important. I think being ready for anything and everything is important. It's also why I don't think that just powerlifting is the right answer, or just bodybuilding or whatever, or just running. I think that it really takes a combination of everything to be a very effective human being and to be prepared for situations like that. Yeah,
completely. We even had somebody on Garage Gym Athletes many seasons ago where they were in a situation where they're on some trail and hiking, and their wife was having an asthma attack and they forgot the inhaler in the car, so he had to run all the way back to get the inhaler and bring it back.
Yeah, man, having your fitness put to the test in those situations. And one thing I've learned in those situations, the more exhaustive, longer endurance ones, is that whole third gear, like that secret strength you get when you're lifting the car off your kid. Those stories you've heard, right? Mm-hmm. That's not real. I think it's real to some degree, but you have to be a really trained human being to see the results of an increase in performance. You're not going to go from fat and out of shape to deadlifting a 2,000 pound car after somebody. It really is this incremental approach. So if you ever think like, well, if I was ever in that situation, I would probably be able to handle it. And my response to you is you probably won't be if you're not training right now.
You can remove the governor on a car, but a car can only go as fast as it's built.
Exactly. All right, man. Well, hopefully everyone got something out of that, and you are more motivated to train. And like I said, it's only been a handful of time. I've been training for well over a decade, and I can count on one hand how many times I've actually been in those situations. But I don't know. What if I wasn't trained for those situations? So just something to think about. Food for thought. And speaking of thoughts, all right, this week's study. Let me read the actual name of the study. Effects of mental training on muscular force, hormonal, and physiological changes in kickboxers. So that is the name of the study. We're going to be talking about mind over matter and how mental training increases strength gains. So we put out in the group, we actually planned to do this one before we even heard it in the group, but someone said they wanted to hear a lot more about the mental side of training and what studies there were behind it. So this is a great one, something that's really interesting to me. So let me dive into the study a little bit more, kind of tell you the results right off the get-go. We'll talk about how some of the stuff was done and how it can apply to you as a garage gym athlete. So they took two groups of high-level kickboxers and performed the same lifting program over 12 weeks. One of the groups did additional mental training, including motivational self-talk and visualizations. Now, while both groups experienced increased performance, the group doing additional mental training made larger gains, and the group doing additional mental training also showed markers of decreased stress, including an elevation in testosterone to cortisol ratio and larger decreases in resting heart rate and blood pressure than the group not performing the mental training. So we're hitting this on a lot of different sides, performance, and then even hormonal response and resting heart rate and blood pressure. So pretty crazy. Now, sometimes you read these studies and you're like, well, I'm not a kickboxer. To be honest, that kind of stuff, this happens a lot in studies. That doesn't really matter. We're taking like human beings and putting them through strength programs. They just happen to have kickboxers, and you'll see, some studies are done on softball players and some are done on random college students, so on and so forth. I wouldn't get too wrapped around that fact. I really don't think that it matters that much, but this one is pretty phenomenal. And something else I want to point out before I kind of get your take on it, Joe, was I was looking at the relative increases in performance. So we have the group who did physical training only, and then we have the group who did physical training plus mental training. And if you actually look at the breakdown of all of their performance metrics, which there are four, medicine ball throw, counter movement jump, bench press, half squat, like they're not like these small increases. It's not like, oh, well, the group who did physical training only had a 10% increase, and the people who did physical training plus mental training had an 11% increase. The physical plus mental training was like almost doubled in every single category of relative performance increases. So like the counter movement jump was about 8%, and it looks about like exactly double, like 16%. Medicine ball throw was an actual double performance, and nearly double with the bench press and half squat. We're talking about relative increases in performance. And so we're not talking about these like little small, like, oh, add a little mental training and you get a 5% jump. We're talking like, holy shit, you can like actually see significant increases in performance just by doing a little bit of mental training. And I'll talk a little bit more how to do it. But Joe, what's your take on this study, having glanced over it and kind of heard me break it down a little bit more?
Yeah, when we talk about dialing in the mental side and focusing on things a lot, but to kind of touch back from, I believe, last week, when we were talking about the stimulus and why we do things, whenever we like programming stuff, if you're just going through the motions of certain movements and things that are working out versus actually like thinking about what you're doing and really trying to emphasize what is is the right emphasis and stimulus, then you're not going to get the full benefit. So like, for example, today, and it's not even just like effort. It's so like today or this week for some of the people, we're doing a whole bunch of tuck jumps. And now with tuck jumps, it's a very explosive movement. And if you're actually thinking every single time to explode up as high as you can versus just, okay, I'm just going to jump in the air and pick my feet up, those are two different things. Now you're technically doing the movement either way, and I'm not saying that like it's trying harder one way or the other, but actually thinking about that last, it's almost like that last 10% of executing the movement properly to fully get the benefit is kind of how I thought of it as well. Now I know a lot of the study was done in between like resting or like post workout, but it's just another side of the mental thing to me.
You know, what you're saying about there is like the intent of the exercise and execution of the exercise. And I think that's so true. I think, so let's say level 1 beginner type stuff is, yeah, I'm just going to encourage you to do the movement and be consistent, you know, and like not much more than that. Like, yeah, if you want to do some half-ass tuck jumps that, you know, you're barely getting off the ground, but you're burning calories, moving, sweating, and you're developing this habit of fitness, that's great. Congratulations. But where I think a lot of people get stuck and they get into this, you know, black and white mindset is like, people think our bodies are robotic. You know, it's just like, put in the sets and reps, and then you're going to pop out on the other side with the same result no matter what. And that's not true. The intent of the stimulus, like you're saying, your intention applied to the exercise, your intensity, all of that stuff matters in the result that you specifically are going to see. And I think so once we get past level 1 area of fitness and going to level 2, you need to be really super intentional about how you are lifting the weight. And when you focus on how you are lifting the weight, it gets more uncomfortable. Even if you're an advanced athlete, if you're thinking about every single, okay, I am, you know, now extending, bringing back down, and because after you have really good muscle memory and good mechanics, you don't need to think much about movement. You know, you can just do it with very little thought. But if you start thinking about it, this is how you continue to see progress. And this isn't the mental side of training that they're talking about here. This is just me encouraging athletes to remain intentional during your training session. You know, drop the Instagram on your phone, you know, the checking emails between sets, all these things that all of us have done. You know, I think it really can kill your performance. Now, keep in mind, in this study, people saw results either way, right? They followed the program, they were consistent, and they saw results. But the difference in what you could see if you were just a little bit more intentional in your training is huge. So let's talk about how to get this done. So specifically, they would do a 15-minute warm-up, general and specific. Then they would do 30 minutes of basically what it looks like to me is some dynamic effort training with, it's close to hypertrophy, you know, muscle endurance type work. So they do bench press and half squat 4 times 8 with 70%. And then they do medicine ball throws and counter movement jumps. Okay, so the group that only did physical training, they did 80 seconds of rest between sets. The people who did mental training, they did 80 seconds of motivational self-talk between sets. So however, excuse me, some people get too wrapped up in how to execute this, but it's just any sort of self-talk that, you know, is going to keep you positive and keep you focused on succeeding in the next set, the next reps, you know, all of these things. So that they're basically just using their rest time to do motivational self-talk between sets. They rested the same amount of time. They just were using their rest time. This is like, you know, we've talked about a lot. Like, I do the dishes and clean the kitchen in my family because my wife cooks. And so I do that at night. And what do I do while I'm doing that? I'm using my time when I clean the kitchen and when I do the dishes to learn. You know, I have an audiobook going because that's one place I can actually double up and still be productive. And this is no different here. To me, it's the same exact thing. I'm going to start implementing this like immediately in all of my training. Because I've never seen a study like this where it's so beneficial. I mean, I've talked about visualization and motivational self-talk for years. In fact, if you are one of our athletes and you haven't done our 21-day mental toughness course, or it was formerly known as Mental Toughness Militia, every single Garage Gym athlete has access to that in their members area. You can go access that, and it has a lot of these kind of things in it. And I put that together back in 2011, 2012 timeframe. Yeah, I did it all in 2012, released it in 2013. Anyway, so putting your rest time to work, I think, is takeaway number one is using whatever rest time you have to do some motivational self-talk in between sets. What's your take on it, and do you think that you will try that?
Doing self-talk during rest.
Yeah, you think you'll do that? You think you'll give it a try?
So I think there's definitely times where I already do that, like when we get to heavier weights, especially like maxing out days, and whenever there's 85, 90% plus of just really like being confident in saying, like, pumping myself up and mentally dialing into those sets versus, hanging out in between, looking at my phone and whatnot.
Yeah, and I think I don't think I do motivational self-talk during my rest, but if it's going to be something that's challenging, I definitely do visualization, which we'll talk more about here in a minute, to where I actually just visualize, like if it's a really heavy back squat or something, I just visualize that repetition happening. So what's it going to feel like on the way down? What am I going to feel like in the bottom? How explosive do I need to be in the bottom to get out and push that weight back up? What am I going to do? I kind of have a contingency plan. What's my plan if I get stuck? Because there's always that sticking point. I have all these plans. So that's one part of mental training I would say I do. I definitely don't think, and I'd have to probably do a few training sessions to see, but I don't think I do any motivational self-talk as of right now. So that's something I'd like to try adding on top of visualization. Now, that's only one part of what they did in this study, with the quote unquote mental training. So takeaway for the athlete, start doing motivational self-talk during your rest times. Now, the second thing that they did may not be as beneficial. It's definitely as beneficial. It might not be as applicable, is the word I was looking for. Applicable for everyone. But they would do 30 minutes after the training session was over, and they would do first-person motor imagery for bench press, half squat, medicine ball throws, and counter movement jumps, which are all the movements that they were testing. So what is first-person motor imagery? It's really what I was talking about. It's just this visualization, like moving through the exercises. And they say the best way to do this is to, when you visualize these things, is to actually visualize from your perspective, not like visualize yourself doing it, not like seeing yourself outside your body doing it, but to actually just visualize what it would be like to do the movement, because it helps your brain better prepare for executing the task when it sees it. So this visualization of the movements for a half hour after your training session is over. Now, I don't think a lot of people have the time nor the desire to do something like that. But it's something, if you are training for something specific and, you really want to make sure that I think it could be really helpful with like powerlifting meets or maybe even a Spartan race, all these things, if you know the obstacles and have done them before, and you can start, visualizing yourself completing them and doing them and what it feels like and how that looks, I think that'd be really beneficial. But personally, I don't know if I'm going to add 30 minutes to the end of my day to visualize my next training session or specific movements, but who knows? Maybe I'll give it a try. Joe, do you think that's something that you would ever tackle?
Probably not. Try to think. So is it like it's in preparation to the next day or following the workout you just did, remembering what you did? What
they're really doing is they were just doing motor imagery for those movements. So their training program, like, it's kind of hard to put in context of like Hard to Kill, which is the track you're on, because you might be doing something almost different every day. Yeah. But if, say, you just wanted to focus on getting your strict press, your back squat, and your deadlift increased, maybe it's just sitting there for 30 minutes after every session, no matter what you did that day, and just focusing on those movements and, walking your body through a training session with those movements over and over again. So really it's kind of movement specific, just making sure that you're executing those and visualizing them.
I'm not sure if I will. I might try it on like pull-ups, because I have certain cueing problems on pull-ups right now because of my shoulder, but yeah.
Now, another thing I want to point out is the other group, the physical training only group, they did neurocognitive tasks. So I didn't look too far into exactly what they're doing, but I'm thinking of things like, have you ever messed around with the app like Lumosity or done any brain training apps? So Lumosity is a brain training app, and there are a lot of other ones out there, but they still had the people doing physical training do some sort of mental stimulation after the fact, which I think is very interesting, because they really controlled for every aspect. So they both had 80 seconds of rest. Okay, good. So there's no difference in the rest. And it's like, well, these people did 30 minutes of visualization stuff. And then you could be like, well, what if they're just working out their brain and no, these guys, the other group actually did like cognitive tasks for 30 minutes after their training session, which kind of controlled for it. They just didn't do visualization. They did more like brain teasers and stuff like that. Mm. And they still didn't see as many results as the people who did the visualization and the motivational self-talk, which I just think it's just insane. Really, especially if you like actually pull up the study, it's just insane how different how much the results are, the performance results are. It's really crazy.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy. I just want to go back to when you were talking about like level 1, level 2 and stuff, because the very last note on the thing that we're reading is that positive self-talk and first-person kinesthetic mental imagery absolutely do not replace slinging around heavy weights and heavy iron, obviously, but they can help get larger gains from your training program. So as you kind of touched on, like getting actually in the groove of good programming and in working out is step one. But if you've already been doing some working out and you need to you need to up your game a little bit more, this is a small thing to incorporate, small and easy to incorporate.
Yeah, I mean, it's super applicable, super easy to do because you can just do it during your rest sets. So I want to encourage every garage gym athlete to start trying it, myself included, because like I said, I haven't been doing the self-talk, been doing more visualization. I think I would like to try both. Now, just going a little bit further, I kind of already mentioned it, but they didn't only see performance indicators. Their resting heart rate was significantly lower and their blood pressure was better. Like, I think, was there anything else? Oh yeah. And then the coolest thing I think is the decreased markers of physiological and psychological stress. So like they had, better testosterone to cortisol levels, and they just were actually like way better off. Let me just go ahead and say better humans when they were doing the mental training thing. Like, not only did they, see performance increases, a lot of things that have to do with you, feeling less stressed. So they had decreased stress markers and more testosterone. Like you're affecting all these different areas that you're really just becoming way more well balanced, which is going to really, help me lead into the next part of this podcast and what we're talking about. But I just think this is super cool, really interesting study. If you guys want to dive more into it, and then Joe, this will be the last thing I say before we move on to the topic. In the mental training program we have inside of Garage Gym Athlete, I reference a study in there, which I thought was really interesting. They had very similar stuff. This study is quite a bit older, but they had like training only, training plus mental performance, and then they had mental performance only. And they still only, so like one group trained and did mental exercises, and then the other group only did mental exercises. And what was crazy was, in order of seeing results, it was training plus mental performance, then training. But the crazy thing is, the people who did literally jack shit, like did not work out, only thought about it, still had performance increases. They weren't significant. They weren't significant performance increases, but they were still increases. And so that study, I'll have to see if I can dig it up. That one, really crazy, also blows my mind. And also one of the reasons I've always been so obsessed with this topic and focusing on this side of the human being and the athlete.
Yeah.
All right. Now let's get into the topic of gaining muscle and losing fat. Either gaining muscle while losing fat or gaining muscle. They're all really one and the same to me. And I'm going to let you kind of kick off your thoughts on this. So really just the topic of doing it, right? Like how is it possible? What do we need to be thinking about? And all of that.
Yeah. Everybody pretty much, when they start working out with us, they pretty much say that they want all of this. And everybody wants everything. Right. Yeah. I actually want to, yeah. And I'm all about it. Like I want all of it too. Like I want to gain muscle and lose fat and be faster and stronger. It's not an immediate thing, right? Yeah. It actually, you said faster and stronger. It's almost like those two different things too. To be strong and fast are almost not necessarily opposing, but harder to achieve at the same time, just like gaining muscle and losing fat. So you got to me, I either ask them if somebody needs to prioritize one or the other, you focus on one, and then the other can have sometimes be a byproduct. So if you can do strength training, and then after a while you can still lose some fat, just not as fast as you would be doing for just straight up cardio. So it all depends on goals for me to me, and like what the programming is you're doing, and what you haven't been doing. So it's kind of situational on the person. But if you do want both, just like with strength and conditioning, like on Harder to Kill, is that you're gonna have to extend your goal window. So if it takes you 2 months to achieve this much strength and 2 months to achieve losing this weight, then you might take 3 to 4 months to achieve both if you're working on both at the same time. There is no speedy process, fast way to do either of them. There's if you're looking for a fast way to do anything fitness wise, you should probably stop doing that.
Right. Or just change your overall goal. How would you just stop? No, but so going to the performance side of things, getting stronger, faster, all that stuff. A lot of coaches out there, if you guys listen to, more advanced coaches, read the articles or whatever, sometimes they'll say, hey, it's not possible. And when I say advanced coaches, I'm talking not like they have a lot of experience years wise. I'm talking about they're working with really top end athletes. So, elite level, I wouldn't call them elite coaches. I just call them coaches who work with elite athletes. There we go. And they will say it's not possible. But the reason that they say it's not possible is because, and I've seen this over and over again, and this is because people always want to come and argue with me or have a conversation about why these things aren't possible. But the information that they are pulling from is some guy who is training these elite level athletes. And so, yes, if you are trying to get Usain Bolt to run faster while gaining muscle, maybe that's going to be difficult. Or, when you're trying to operate at these opposite ends of the spectrum, it's just going to become more of a challenge. And so most of the time, and most of the people listening to this aren't going to find themselves in this, hey, I'm already 3% body fat. I'm looking to cut it a little bit more while also, gaining strength, like all like 10 other things, right? That's not where most of us are starting right now. And so that's why I just urge people to know that it's 100% possible to gain muscle and lose fat at the same time. I did a long video, about the difference between being catabolic and anabolic, because there's this old, idea that's still around today that you can't be catabolic and anabolic at the same time. And I find it very frustrating when people even say stuff like that, because I used to hear that growing up in the more bodybuilding world. I'd hear that you can't be catabolic and anabolic, or anabolic and catabolic at the same time. So what does that mean? Anabolic is just like you're building up. It's a feature of your metabolism. It's building things in surplus, and catabolic is tearing down or breaking down. And they're really just they're parts of your metabolic system. They're not really necessarily these states that you attain, like nirvana or something like that. You're not like constantly in this anabolic state. And I used to believe that, but the truth of the matter is that they are just processes that your body performs. You could be catabolic for part of the day, you could be anabolic for part of the day. But like you're saying, Joe, you could accelerate like a muscle gaining process, which would be more anabolic, by only focusing on that, only focusing on that one thing and having a shorter goal window. And same with losing fat. You could go a little bit more catabolic, less anabolic, and, do that and shorten that time frame and probably see more results. But if you want to do both, which is a little bit harder, you definitely can't do them at the same exact time. I think that's what people mean, and what has kind of gotten lost is you can't do both processes at the same moment, and I mean second in time. Your body can't be doing both at the same time. It's either one or the other, but it can be different in a day, a week, a month, a year of your training program. So if you do want to be kind of switching back and forth, that it's just like task switching, right? Like if you wanted to write a book, but you kept stopping every hour to respond to email, hey, that email might be 100% necessary for you to do, but you do know that you could write your book a little bit faster if you stopped checking email altogether, right? And so that's just kind of the point I like to point out, is that you can do both. It is possible. And just really, I've said a lot of words to agree with you that you need to extend your timeline. If you have this goal to do both at the same time, if you want to shorten your window, know that you might be doing it at the expense of the other option, whichever one that might be.
Yeah, I think dividing up your days to get both in, kind of like what we do in Hard to Kill. So like yesterday, it was a lot of lifting. It was basically everything we did was touching a barbell. But today, there was no barbell. It was a lot of different other things, body weight stuff, some kettlebell stuff, and just working different systems that way. And you mentioned that depending on what level you're at, if you're a high level thing, then you're talking about fractions of a percent to get better at. But if you're not doing anything, then you could literally do anything and get better. So
yeah,
you have to assess where you're at versus just, okay, I want all of this stuff.
And that's what I used to point out if someone had never trained, and then they started doing something, they started doing CrossFit, they started doing whatever, and they got stronger. Like, yeah, of course you got stronger. Like, you can get stronger by lifting, milk jugs. Like, that will make you stronger, but you're going to cap out real fast, right? Then you have to start focusing on your programming and getting intentional. Now, something else I want to bring up in just the body composition world, because I think that this often gets overlooked, and it really is. I'm not going to say one important factor. These are the most important factors. The most important factors if you want to gain muscle or you want to lose fat, i.e., you have any sort of body composition goal, i.e., every single person who's training. And so sometimes I think we take these for granted, Joe, because you and I are fairly good at these things naturally, just because we've been focusing on fitness and nutrition and health for longer periods of time. But if you don't have all of these things dialed in, I'm calling it your pre-flight checklist. If you don't have all these things dialed in, I'm not saying that it's impossible to lose fat or it's impossible to gain muscle. I'm just saying that you are making things way harder than they need to be. If you find losing weight challenging, if you find gaining muscle challenging, if you find doing both challenging, it's probably because you don't have this pre-flight checklist taken care of. So one is you have to be in a low stress standpoint. And when I say low stress, it's fine if you have a stressful job. Like I've been in some really stressful situations as an entrepreneur, in the military, so on and so forth. Like, I'm not saying avoid those things. I'm not saying you can't ever be stressed. Also, having 3 kids is a little bit stressful sometimes. What I'm saying is you need to manage that stress in the actual, hormone cortisol, like taking care of that. And we've talked about ways to do that a lot in this podcast. So low level aerobic cardio can help lower your cortisol levels. We've talked about it. Your mental game, we just talked about in this study, that can help lower your cortisol levels. So you really need to be dialed in. And some of the other things I'm going to touch on will be really important. So manage your stress is really the first one. The second is you really need to digest your food well. And that's going to start with how it enters your mouth to how your body actually digests it. And Joe, you probably know more about this stuff than me, but really don't swallow your food whole. Make sure that you chew it. A lot of people miss that. Like that's where digestion starts, is the manual labor, so to speak, you put in the mouth before it gets swallowed. Then after that, you really need to focus on your digestion. And there are a lot of things that you could do, probiotics, making sure that you have, good gut microbiome, all these different things that you could focus on. But that's the second thing, is making sure that you're digesting your food well. The third thing would be hydration. Hydration is so important and so often overlooked. And sometimes people get in a good habit for a little bit of time, but then they fall off. You really just need to live the water bottle lifestyle, carry that thing around all the time, drink a lot of water. Next, get adequate levels of vitamin D, not through supplementation, through sunshine, if possible. If you live in some sort of climate where it's not possible, then supplement. Sleep, make sure that you are sleeping. Bottom line, you want to make sure that you're getting enough sleep. That can be different for everyone. Now, some people are like, well, I don't actually need that much sleep. Well, there's a study done on people who, there are apparently people in this world who can not just function with 6 hours of sleep, but like they are perfectly healthy and good to go. And guess what? They're estimating that it's about 3% of the population that are in that boat. Everyone else is going to be in the 7 to 8 hours, possibly 9 hours of sleep window. So you're probably not that 3%. You might be, but you're probably, like I used to think, I was like, I operate pretty well because I had to do a lot in the military. I'm 5 and 6 hours, but I just know now, having my sleep pretty dialed in, that I operate a lot better with more sleep. And then if you want to lose weight, you should be trying to increase your muscle mass. Now, this is kind of that the pre-flight checklist is over. So stress, digestion, hydration, sunshine, sleep. make sure that you're doing those things. Now, you want to make your body as thermogenic as possible, and how you do that is by having muscle mass. And so don't go type in thermogenic on Google, because you're going to get a shit ton of supplements that you don't need to be taking. I'm talking about becoming thermogenic by just having muscle mass. If you have muscle mass, your body's going to run a little bit warmer. It's going to take more calories to consume. Your basal metabolic rate is going to be higher. All these things just because you have more muscle mass. Now, you might not actually gain a ton of muscle mass if you're trying to lose weight, but your training should be trying to gain that muscle mass. Because if you're trying to gain that muscle mass, you're going to be more thermogenic. You're going to burn more calories. This is good for any human being. You want to be in this state, whether you're trying to gain muscle. Because if you're trying to gain muscle, then do it. Eat a lot of calories, and you probably will. If you're trying to lose weight, try and gain muscle, and that type of training is going to help you lose weight by becoming more thermogenic. And then especially if you're trying to lose fat, you need to be doing a lot of easy aerobic work. And that's why we program that in Shred. There's a lot of aerobic zone type training, just because easy aerobic work is going to burn fat, and it's just a lot easier and makes your circulatory system work better, everything. So that is kind of, in a nutshell, the pre-flight checklist and things that you should be thinking about in your training if you're trying to gain muscle, lose fat, or possibly do both at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I could probably talk about nutrition and stuff for a while. One thing from before, it's like when we were talking about the fractional gains, depending on what level you're at. If you're eating like garbage, you don't need to be subscribing to these meal services that are measuring all of your macros and doing all the stuff. You just need to eat cleaner. You just need to just cook, and just start with that. You know, my dad tried to clean up his diet a few months ago, and some of the guys that he hangs out with were doing keto. So he's like, okay, I'm going to clean up and I'm going to do keto. I'm just like, no, stop. Just eat clean. just cut out these couple of things. Just eat clean and stick with this for a couple of weeks. And he kind of fought me on it at first, but I was like, no, just do it, and then we'll work from there, because you don't need to make extreme changes at first. The more extreme change you make, the less likely you are to stick with it.
Yeah, almost any athlete I've coached. And, we always take a really small approach when we're working with anyone in a coaching situation. And typically the first thing I eliminate, if I can tell there's a lot of low hanging fruit, I'm going to tell you to stop consuming liquid calories. And that by far is like the biggest. How many people? I've probably had some athletes lose like 50 pounds, depending on their starting point, just from stopping liquid calories. And most of the time, I mean like a hard stop. So I'm talking no cream in your coffee. That's a small one. And then we're also talking about no soda. If that was in your life, I'm going to help you lose a lot of weight really fast with that advice. And then no alcohol. There's so many calories in alcohol. If you didn't know, there are actually 4 macronutrients. There's carbs, fat, protein. The 4th one is actually alcohol. It's 7 calories per gram. And that one can really F you up and add a lot that you weren't looking to. So getting rid of liquid calories if you have weight to lose is the first spot. And then if you want to start looking at all these other things like, micronutrients and keto diets and all this other stuff, after you've added a couple of vegetables and lean meats, okay, now we can start doing these fancier dieting techniques or counting macros. But if you're still drinking soda, having beer, cocktails, cream in your coffee, and other sugary beverages, Gatorade with your workout, you don't even need to be talking about this other stuff yet. I 100% agree with you. There's so many other things that you need to do before you go down the nutrition rabbit hole too far about what you should be doing. Most of the time, it's really simple stuff, just one thing to work on at a time.
And just real quick on the stress part, look into grounding or earthing, whatever.
Yeah,
there's 2 different things. So like if you are at a high stress job and you have a whole lot going on with kids, just ground yourself 10-15 minutes a day if you can.
Dude, you just opened a whole can of worms. So now I'm not going to talk about it, but what we will do,
put a pin maybe for another time.
Yeah, one we're going to have to definitely cover some of the research on earthing or grounding, and how that works and some of the research that's been done on it. But yeah, we'll come back to that one. For now, anyone interested in what Joe just said, Google it. And there's some pretty cool information out there about it, and something we can definitely dive deeper in.
But to go back to nutrition, one thing that I definitely like to help people with, and even ourselves, is reducing the inflammation and like inflammation that you don't even realize you might have.
That's huge.
But my mother-in-law came out back in April, and she didn't have a very good diet, and she came out and eating with us how we eat for 2 weeks. think she lost like 5 to 7 pounds, not even being active, just lost it because all of the inflammation and everything just left her, and she had a hard time sleeping. She actually had to take sleep aids, but when she was here, she slept very soundly. And if reduced inflammation will help your sleep, we also touched on sleep. So, and a lot of that comes with digestion and food and things that might be irritating you. You said probiotics. A lot of things now. Like, I don't go looking for things that say probiotics. I guess I just know some things that have probiotics, but it's another one of those marketing buzzwords that people will say, "Oh, no probiotics," or "extra probiotics," or whatever. Which they're still good, but just try to make sure that those are good. But one thing that we consciously always try and get in our diets are cruciferous vegetables like cabbages, because that's really good for your gut health. It helps promote the good bacteria in your intestines, and also eating fermented foods, because all of that helps to clean out some of the gunk in you and get the good bacteria to digest all of what you got going on. And if there's less gut inflammation, then there's going to be less inflammation all around.
Man, you made me realize that every single one of those points I just talked about could be their own topic, and we could go in a lot deeper. No, I think we will, man. I think all of those are talking a lot more about sleep, how to specifically reduce inflammation. I think that'd be a great topic for a podcast, because I'm 100% agreement with you. Like, if that's the only thing that you were trying to do through diet, health, fitness wise, like, you would have a ton of mental clarity and mental acuity. You would not struggle with weight. Even if you had really simple training, you would see results faster. You wouldn't be in as much pain. You would recover faster. There's just so many different things that come with reduced inflammation. Yeah, we could hop into all these topics, and I think that we will. So I'll definitely put a pin in these so we can cover more. But let's move on to the workout of the week. It's one that I'm pretty familiar with. And I know most everyone is, because Memorial Day is coming up. Actually, I think this is being published on Memorial Day, technically, right? I think so. Am I wrong? I might be a week off.
You're a week off.
I'm a week off. So that's right. We have MURPH planned for Saturday, and that coming Monday is Memorial Day. So a week from now should be Memorial Day when you're listening to this, if it's on Monday. So MURPH is coming up. We put it in the programming more frequently than most anyone else. And on Memorial Day, a lot of people are doing it. Now, if you want like full breakdown from my last year MURPH to like really dive into this stuff, you could go to end-of-3fitness.com/MURPH. And there are a bunch of different links there, tips, tricks, strategies, but we'll cover some right now. Let me see. I'm going to start with you, Joe, on any tips, tricks that you have, and then I'll get into the real nitty gritty, like little things I think could help people with. Because some of them are just like your approach to it, not necessarily any strategy. So I'll let you kick it off.
I don't know. Well, some are pretty obvious. Some of them you might even cover, like don't go hot out the gate with your first mile. That's a lesson you've had to had to learn.
Yeah, it happens all the
time. Breaking up the sets into 20 rounds of 5, 10, 15 is good. I think one of the things that have made the biggest difference in my MURPH times and stuff is working on my push-ups. So like before, when I would do MURPHs, I would always, even unvested, I was always have to break them up into five reps each for push-ups. So I would do 5 and I'd sit back on my knees and I'd do 5 again. But now just working in push-ups wherever I can do 10 all the way through, which helps. And something that I learned in my last MURPH is don't eat before. I guess keep up with what you're doing, whatever you're normally doing. But so if you work out fasted, don't feel the need to eat something before MURPH, because I did, and my stomach was not happy after most of the calisthenics.
Do some carbohydrate rinsing. Don't eat.
yeah, there you go. They're carb rinse instead. And then the mile, kind of expect to be for me, my second mile is about a minute slower than my first, but that last mile is when you should really just leave it all out and get as much as you can. Empty
the tank. Yeah. And let me rewind just a second, just for anyone who doesn't know what the MURPH workout is. So it's in memory of Lieutenant Michael Murphy. He was killed in action in Afghanistan. And this is a workout that he actually did. When he did the workout, it was called Body Armor. After he passed, received the Medal of Honor, CrossFit actually named this workout after him. And it is run 1 mile, 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 squats, run 1 mile. And if you have a 20-pound vest or body armor, you should wear it. Now, it does say that you can partition it however you would like. Now, anyone out there who says, this way is harder, it's not. And to be honest, we already talked about me doing hand release, push-up, and strict pull-ups MURPH this past week. And I was doing that to lower my heart rate. Lower heart rate typically means a little bit easier, right? It may have taken me a longer time to do the workout, but those things are actually easier because unless you can do like 50 strict pull-ups unbroken, it's not going to be as challenging as doing kipping. Now, there are benefits to both. I think if you can't do any strict pull-ups, you probably shouldn't be kipping either. I don't think it's good for you. So things to keep in mind if you're thinking about tackling this workout, maybe do your sub, whatever it is. Ring rows is going to be my go-to for anybody who can't do pull-ups. Do ring rows, and that should be your scaling option. Now, Joe mentioned going 20 rounds. So it says you can partition. So run a mile. You can't partition the runs. So run a mile and then 20 rounds of 5 pull-ups, 10 push-ups, 15 squats. The only thing I'll throw in there, Joe, you talked about not being able to hit the push-ups because, you run out of gas. When I first started this project back, my push-ups had surprisingly failed me, or left me, should I say. It took me a few weeks to work them back up because I was reaching muscle failure as well towards the round 14, 15. I was failing on the push-ups and having to rest more than I wanted to. And so what I've found that works is if you are in that situation, but you still want to go as fast as possible. Now, all these tips and tricks are based off the fact that you don't just want to complete it, you want to do it quickly. So you do 20 rounds of 5 pull-ups, 5 push-ups, 15 squats, 5 push-ups. So you're breaking up the push-ups into 2 sets of 5s on either side of your squat. If you have problems being finishing out the push-ups. That's a great way to do it. I did that. I think I only did it once or twice in this project so far, but it significantly increased my time because I never reached that muscle failure that you're talking about. Once I did that, then once my push-ups came back, down to 5, 10, 15. And I really haven't found a faster way until recently. I broke it into 5 sets instead of 20. But I did that unvested and I was still able to do everything. So I was able to do sets of 20 pull-ups unbroken. I was able to do everything unbroken, sets of 40 and 60, 80? What is that? 75 squats. Anyway, I did 5 sets instead of 20. And if you can do everything unbroken and move just as fast, it will be faster because if you think about there's fewer transitions in there, but it's really freaking hard to get to that point. And I'm not at that point with a vest on. I'm only at that point with a vest off. But that is really the fastest way. Now, other little tips and tricks. Like Joe said, don't go hot out the gate, but don't overpace because you could lose like a full minute or two. So if you know your mile times, try and keep it around 90% instead of 100. Pull-ups. I already told you what to do on the push-ups. Squats is the big thing. I think people do squats too slowly when I see them do MURPH. It really becomes almost like a rest period. People are taking several seconds to do one squat. You should be up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down until you don't feel like you can hold that pace anymore. But squats are where people get really slow. And then that last mile, really just stop feeling sorry for yourself and in thinking about how much your legs hurt. All that's going to go away in about 45 seconds into the run. Your heart rate might be jacked, but that whatever pain you feel, all of that, from a muscular endurance standpoint, is going to go away. Now you just need to run. You need to run and focus, really stay focused. This is something, so I'm doing MURPH every single week. My buddy Ben, he joins me. He's joined me for at least maybe half of them now. And a tip I gave him, because he's getting really fast. He's getting really pretty good at MURPH. And the tip I gave him was dude, you need to focus more. And he when I first told him that at the beginning of the workout, he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, you really need to focus, dude. You need to act like this is like a test. Like you need to stay concentrated on staying fast and keeping the pacing that you want. And I told him that, and he PR'd that day. He PR'd that day with a vest on, all because he stayed focused. It's really hard to do because whether you're doing MURPH, like a lot of our athletes in the 30-minute time frame or up to 60 minutes, staying focused for that long, that much time is very challenging. But that is my biggest tip for most people now, is if you want to do MURPH quickly, you need to dial yourself in mentally to where you can focus on your pacing, on staying fast, on your repetitions. If music is going to distract you, then drop the music and stay focused. Like do whatever you have to stay as in the game mentally as you possibly can and stay focused. And that's my biggest tip. And I think everything I've got on doing MURPH quickly. And then also making sure that you remember the man, especially on Memorial Day, everyone who has paid the ultimate price for our freedom, do the workout and remember, do both.
Yep.
All right, man. Well, we will, other than being brought to you by Blueberries, we're actually brought to you by Garage Gym Athlete. So go check out garagegymathlete.com. A lot of our athletes listening to this, really appreciate your support, your feedback on the podcast, and also your consistency in training. If you're listening to this and you're not one of our athletes, you can very easily fix that problem by starting a 14-day free trial at garagegymathlete.com. And I highly, highly recommend it. Joe, I'm going to ask you this every week, man. Why should someone start training with us? Like, why? Why do you think someone should train with us?
Because we're just full of awesomeness.
Yeah, we're full of awesomeness from so many different ways. You'll get access to our mental training course, which we have some people going through on Instagram and tagging us on that, and some people who didn't even know it existed. So if you're one of our athletes and you didn't know that we had this 21-day mental training program, like go access that. If you want access to that, start the free trial, and you can go through it. But other than that, man, I don't have anything else. I appreciate everybody listening. If you want the show to do well and you want more awesome people to train with, leave us a 5-star review and positive comment. If you're on iTunes, we would really, really appreciate it. What that does, it helps iTunes little algorithms to throw this show to more people, recommend it to more people, and get the word out there about this Garage Gym revolution that's happening each and every single day. So if you do that, really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. If you want to learn more, go to garagegymathlete.com. You can learn about our training. Let us send you a copy of our book, The Garage Gym Athlete, or you can even get featured on the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. Thanks for listening.